Hey everybody, St. Paul here, and welcome to episode 38 of Music on the Run. And this is a really cool episode. One of my dearest friends on the planet, Oliver Leiber, is next on Music on the Run. Hey everybody, St. Paul here. Welcome to episode 38 of Music on the Run. All right, confession time. I took 3 weeks off of running. Yeah. But I'm back on, and it feels great. I ran 4 miles today, and, do yourself a favor. Make sure you take some time out for yourself. Go get moving. You'll feel so much better for doing it. Anyway, I'm back on. I figure the guy who has a podcast about running should probably practice what he preaches. But anyway, my next guest is an incredible songwriter, producer, guitar player, drummer, among many other things. He's had incredible success writing and producing for people like Paula Abdul, The Corrs, Aretha Franklin, to name a few. He happens to be one of my dearest buddies on the planet. Please welcome Oliver Leiber. There he is. Hey, we've done this before in the very room that you're in over there. We did this when you and I did an F Deluxe record. Isn't that right?
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
That was so much fun.
Man, how long ago was that now? A couple of years? 3 years? 4 years?
Probably more than that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't do a lot of these interviews, so I want to say thank you, first of all, for taking the time out to do this.
I need to clear the air with you about something. Because what number did you say this was?
38.
38, yeah. So it took you 38 to call me to get to the bottom of the barrel and the end of your Rolodex.
Check please. Check please.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's not true. You're not at the bottom. Now, how will you feel when it goes to 8,000 episodes? Because
right.
Then
you circle back, you mean? And you circle back?
Then we'll circle back again and tell our story, because we'll be 85, still producing records together and all that. I was just out there. We were hanging in the very room that you're in right now, and we were doing yet another record. It seems like you and I, we have been producing and writing records together for, do we even say the 40 word? Almost 40 years.
Is it? I mean, 86,
6, something 85? Like that. Yeah, so let's not say 40 yet. That's coming.
Okay. Yeah.
That's coming.
Yeah.
You've been in every record I've been on or involved in since I left Prince, I think. Every solo record or group record. Yeah. You just keep coming back for more punishment, don't you?
Yeah. Well, the pay's horrible. The
How
hours
much you getting paid for this interview,
grueling.
too, by the way?
The company is
not so good.
Not so good. Never smells good in the room. So, how can I stay away?
Oh, I know. Yeah, you want to, for those of you listening to this is like hanging out with my
Should we start again?
No,
okay.
I think this is the charm of this interview, and I hope it continues down this dismal path.
Yeah.
I've known Oliver for a very, very long time, and it's been such a great hang. And we keep coming back for more. Sometimes we make a bunch of money, sometimes we lose money, and the running joke is, how much money is this interview going to cost me? And I think that's what you said, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But the truth is I do it because I love working with you, and you're one of the most talented musicians and writers and producers in your own right that I know. And it's always fun, and it's always feeds me musically. So, and we're so aligned. I mean, our influences and where we come from are just so aligned that there's that, I think that's where you get writing teams and great producing teams and bands where there's just a telepathy and just a chemistry. So I've always, felt that with you from the first time we were stuck in a room together, and someone said, "You guys should know each other," and off we went, and the result of that, right out of the bat, right, was
unbelievable.
Decent. Yeah.
Well, thank you, bro. It's been that the feeling is mutual. First of all, I've learned a lot about many different things. How to dress, by the way. Do you see the coat that I'm wearing? Those of you listening to this.
Oh, is that one? Is that from my?
That's one of Ollie's coats.
Oh yeah.
Ollie would give me coats.
Lord's.
Is that a Lord's? It's a very nice coat that I'm wearing.
Yeah, you have to show the lining because it's kind of all about the lining.
What is that? Beautiful. It's velvet. Is that?
It's like dragon, gold thread, dragon motif. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you'll never get it back.
I will never see it again.
You'll never see that again. I barely fit into it, but I still will never give it back to you.
That was from the Rod Stewart days.
Is that right?
Yeah.
We'll definitely get into that for sure.
All right.
I want to know what you've been doing. Okay, right before COVID hit, you finished a pretty incredible record for Quinn Sullivan. Tell me a little bit about that record that just came out.
Yeah, well, so we had been, I had been introduced to Quinn. I think it came through Dave Wolf, Beth Hart's manager, another amazing singer-songwriter who I've had the pleasure of working with in the past. And she's on Mascot Records, which is a small label out of the Netherlands. And Dave Wolf, Quinn is on that label. And Dave Wolf essentially made the introduction when they sort of put it out there that they were looking for someone. They had this really talented guitar player who'd been sort of under Buddy Guy's wing for years and years, ever since he was, 5 or 6, or, there's videos out there of him playing with Buddy Guy and all these other blues legends as a, tiny kid. The guitar's bigger than him. There's plenty of YouTube stuff on Quinn. But the message I got was sort of, what do you think of him? What do you think of his voice? What do you think beyond just being a blues phenom? Like, do you see something there? Is he an artist? Is he, they were sort of, that label hadn't really dealt with a lot of singer-songwriter type artists, John Mayer type artists, for lack of a better comparison. But they were essentially coming to me saying, will you get in the studio with him? Will you just write, so just see what it's like and just give us some feedback, like, what do we have here? And he flew out from Boston with his dad, and we sat here, and he played me a snippet of an idea off his iPhone, and it was just off and running. And it was very easy to write, with the song sort of wrote itself in a day or so, and which ended up on the record, a song called She's Gone. And it kind of went from there, and the record company liked, what they heard, and were really surprised by the change of direction, from what they had come to expect from him. And that started the process of about 1.5 years of writing. And he would, in between tour, come, and we'd spend anywhere from 3 to 5 days, and eventually wrote this album, and so I had cut the basics before the pandemic hit. He came out here and had, you played on it, but, bunch of great drummers, Abe and Aaron Sterling and David Goodstein, and guitar players, and, just a bunch of great players. And I cut the basics, and then the pandemic hit. But I had enough raw material that I could sit here and do, kind of my thing anyway, which is to, sort of go in deep and start, comping and doing all that stuff, doing my own overdubs as I saw fit, and trying to fill in the holes, sending you files, sending other people files to try and complete the production. So it was kind of great because I had a lot of time and a lot of quiet and a lot of space in order to really focus in on honing the productions and refining the record. So that took me about 6 months into the pandemic, and then I really finished that. Joe Zook mixed the record and did an amazing job. Sure, another really talented guy. And and so that was kind of what I was into and what I finished coming into this pandemic, and then had absolutely nothing to do after that, and have been, I don't know, curling up chords.
You've been curling chords, throwing things away, organizing.
Yeah,
I was out
making
there.
sure all the faders are, Unity gain. No, actually, it's been kind of great because I've been able to get to some of the stuff that you just generally never have time to do or the inclination because you're too busy and you're working.
And you're a dad. Hello.
And I am a dad. I'm a single dad, and I have the kids half time, and so every other week it's like I drop everything, and it's I'm making waffles, and I'm a Uber cab and an ATM machine, and everything in between.
You're a couple of years behind me on that one, and you get to see the future of what it's going to be like to have adult children and the problems and the fun that go along with that. And then I get to see you deal with what I dealt with about 10 years ago. And welcome to the hang there, brother man.
Thank you. Yeah, I was a late bloomer, and now I get it, because I'm like, ancient, and I'm dealing with a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. And it's like, okay, I get why people have kids, in their late 20s, 30s. But anyway, it keeps me on my toes, keeps me, it keeps me young too.
Your girls are the most beautiful young ladies, and I just adore them. I'm their Uncle Paul.
You're their Uncle Paul and their godfather.
That's right.
So
I love
ready.
Those babies.
Get ready.
So you've been an honorary Peterson for about, 35 years, I guess. Not quite 40.
Not quite 40.
We all love you, of course, all the Peterson family. We met you when you were in 20s, and we'll get to how our relationship later. But let's go back to New York City. First of all, explain. We have to tell the listeners and viewers about your musical family. Will you explain who your pops is?
Yeah. Well, my dad, he passed away, like 7 years ago or so. But my dad was half of a songwriting team, Leiber and Stoller. He was a lyricist, and they, just a songwriting team that really sort of were at the very, very early stages of rock and roll.
Give us some names. Do you mind dropping some names of who your dad worked with?
God, so many people. I mean, Elvis Presley, the Coasters. Oh my God! My head's like, you got to just pull it up.
That's good enough. That's all we need. Those are pretty big names.
Some classic stuff. Some Hound Dog, Jailhouse Rock, Stand By Me, on Broadway, Kansas City, just, a lot of the stuff that was staples for the next generation that followed them, which was Lennon, McCartney, and a bunch of other teams that came. But they were very early writing, and they were the first independent producers, actually. Which is, I don't know how interesting a fact that is, but up until Leiber and Stoller, producers were sort of assigned to a record label. They were the in-house producers, much the way I think George Martin was still in England when he met the Beatles. He was with EMI, was it? And he was a staff producer. I can't be getting this all wrong. People will correct you, I'm sure. Or correct me.
I hope so.
But they were the first guys to say, no, we're not signing anyone. We'll produce for Atlantic, we'll produce for Warner's, we'll produce, independent producers, writer producers. So anyway, I grew up with some pretty interesting people, coming through the house. Phil Spector used to walk our dog.
Now, Phil worked for your father.
Yeah. Leiber and Stoller gave him his start, and there were also a lot of writing teams that worked under, they were so successful for a period of time and had so much work. There was this like 8 to 10 year period where they were doing everything, they had so much that they couldn't possibly write all the material for these records. And they started to sign writing teams, Carole King, Goffin and King, and Cynthia Weil and Barry Mann.
Yep.
And I'm going to forget, a dozen of them.
But that was sort of the Brill Building?
Sorry?
Was this the Brill Building?
This is the Brill Building. So
okay.
This was, they were in the Brill Building. They were up on the, up there on the penthouse, and they signed all these writing teams. And literally there was, a hallway. And I sort of remember the tail end of this because I was younger and things started to change by the time I was, 10 or 11. Things were shifting. But I do remember rooms, with pianos in them, and there were songwriting teams in there writing songs for records. And so that's who my dad was. And that's kind of how I got into it. He was all about work. And if, my brother is also a great musician, Jed. And if we wanted to spend time with my dad, when we were younger, you pretty much had to get dropped off at the studio. And I'd get plunked in front of the couches, in front of the console. Sure. And it was just like, shh, be quiet, I'm going to hang out. And I watch these amazing session players cutting tracks and cutting records and, and just sort of absorbing and, soaking in the process, not consciously. I didn't care. I just really wanted to be there. But in retrospect, I think it was all very normalized and familiar to me,
It's just what your dad did. And you wanted to see him, and you're hanging out, and you're getting all this music coming and thrown at you. You pretty much got that all through osmosis. Of course, your natural ability, but...
Yeah, but, and I also think it really affected the kind of player that I became, both as a drummer and as a guitar player, which was, what I saw, and I think my dad talked about this too, was guys that came in and played incredibly well together, but tight as a rhythm section. And I saw guys that came in and, after grooving for a minute with the rhythm, they found their part. And it was just like, and I remember I remember the first time I watched a record, I think it was with Marlo Henderson, a great guitar player. And it was this groove and these changes, and I could have even been James Gadsden playing drums, but he played one note. It was just like ding, 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 whatever. It was just this one note, and it went through the changes. And it was the first time I'd heard someone grab a common tone, and as a guitar player and play through change. And honestly, my mind just went it was so funky and so in the pocket. It was and everyone was playing the changes and he was staying on that note. And, that's the kind of stuff that appealed to me. I don't know how else to say it. There was a simplicity and a soulfulness. And I think, in my playing, I've never sought to be a ripping kind of player, or a chopsy player, I've always wanted to be a pocket player and be a guy that found parts and played in a section. So I think from the outset, my come from was very much about records and playing in a section. And, I went through my phase as a teenager and in my early 20s, jamming, it was jamming was a thing and guys were and so I did my fair share of jamming, but at a certain point, I realized it's less about that and more about finding those parts that made a song work and made a production work. And,
So the stage was set. Here you are. You're a kid. Your father and his partner are making some of the most classic black music.
Right.
Which is interesting in itself.
Sorry, say that again.
I just said that's interesting in itself. Here are the couple of white dudes who are making the most influential black music.
Right.
And that must have been absorbed into you as a kid. Your love for soul and your love for funk and your love for everything must have come, partially through those experiences that you were witnessing.
Very much. Because first of all, my dad could not use any of the sort of, by the time I was like 11, 12, whatever, we're talking like now 72, 73, 74, and there's like what we now call classic rock, and that it's like he could not use any of that. He didn't want to hear it. It didn't move him. It never did. And from a very early age, the records that were in our house, apart from all of his, like Coasters and and Drifters and Willamette, Big Mama Thornton, and like it was all blue. And the Three Kings, BB, Albert, Freddie.
Wow.
It was, Ray Charles, all that stuff. That was all the records that we had. And that's, when he talked about music and when he got excited and he would talk about singers, it was always black, blues, or R&B singers. That's all he cared about. That's all that moved him. And that's all that he ever really wanted to do, And as it happened before I was born, like the rhythm, look, they were called race records back then, the records that they were making. And they were recording initially very small regional artists in the South, blues records and things like that. The original Hound Dog was Big Mama Thornton, Willamette Thornton. Presley heard Hound Dog because it was being played by a cover band in a Las Vegas lounge.
No.
I mean, he got the song like third hand or something.
I didn't know that story.
But Leiber and Stoller were interested in making those records with those artists, black artists, and all of the early stuff they did in the early 50s and for the first 7, 8 years, whatever. That's what that's what that was. That was their focus. And and that comes from his growing up in Baltimore and growing up in a ghetto that was really like black Jewish ghetto that where they were all living together or on top, or I don't know if it's separated by some railroad tracks, or I've got various stories that aren't completely clear to me, but that's where he came from and that culture, and that's all that ever moved him, musically and culturally.
Interesting.
So I inherited that. By the time I came around, right, he was in New York and we were living on the Upper West Side, which is certainly, a different background than he grew up with. But what was weird is when I stepped through the, front door, of our apartment, culturally, and what I got from him was who he was and what he was interested in. And it had very little to do with what my life was like and what my exposures were like when I stepped out of that door, And frankly, musically, I was kind of like dipping into stuff that was 10 and 15 years older because it was like all of his early records. So
right.
I was kind of getting both then. So I was getting the Stones and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Bad Company as we move on. But it was all mixed with all of that blues and R&B that, I had grown up on. So those were kind of my influences,
What an incredible advantage for someone like you and someone like me, because my mom did the same thing for me. I had all the big band swing era things happening for me. And not only did I love Stevie, but I loved all the stuff that my mom was playing at the time. And here you are, a kid coming up, and you're sitting witnessing these sessions, and you have all the history of your dad and his partner, but yet you're a kid, and you're like, no, wait a minute, I want to do my own thing. Now,
totally.
So you went off on your own while you were in New York. Were you playing?
Well, I'm getting a much more important call. Hang on.
Oh, that's.
By the way, so Squire, this is you. I want you to know that because you're going to watch this interview eventually, and I just want you to know that This is you calling and you're interrupting, young man. All right.
Thanks, Squire. I appreciate that. Nice bass amp, by the way, or guitar amp. I mean, by the way.
All right.
So you were.
Set this up.
So what are you doing when you're a teenager? You got to be playing out and everything, right?
Yeah. So I had a band in high school. Well, I mean, I remember the first time. I think I was 8, and I was at camp. I played the drums. I started as a drummer, and I was playing the drums. My brother played keyboards, and he had this like Farfisa. It was the Gibson version of the Farfisa. It wasn't even the Farfisa. And we went away to summer camp. I was 10, he was 11, and I don't know why I'm telling this story. I'm telling the story because it was the first time there was a talent show, and we decided we would play for the talent show. And I set up my drums, had a little Ringo kit. I had the little 3-piece Ludwig Ringo kit, but the student version, the standard, not the big boy kit that I eventually got. But
Right.
and we played, and we some 3-chord jam, something pretty simple. We probably went on for 15 minutes. It probably started at one tempo and ended at another.
I hope so. Yeah, ended at a different one.
But afterwards, what I remember, because all the girls from the girls' side of the camp were on one side, and all the guys were on the other. And I just remember after playing and getting off stage, all these girls coming up to me, and that was really, like all this talk about influences, and I mean, let's be real. It was like
the real deal here.
I had found my superpower. And it was drums, and it was rock and roll, and like so many people, you hear talk about great musicians. That there was that. Oh my God! All of a sudden, I felt like here's something that I can do, and I can do it well, and it's fun, and girls
on film. Yeah.
Anyway, that was like my first live performance that I recall. I guess that's why I said it. But we started a band in high school. We played all the local dances around Manhattan. Mostly the private school circuit.
Right.
Right. And that was really sort of that would have been 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. Until I was getting in so much trouble that I just got sent out of New York to a little working farm.
Oh, do tell.
Yeah.
Do tell. Give me the short version of where you went to finish your high school years.
Well, as surprising as this may seem to people out there, I had a slight wild side to me, little bit of edge. Had a proclivity for getting myself in situations, doing things that were, in retrospect, probably not the healthiest, probably not the best choices. But anyway, I was running amok as a teen in New York, and at a certain point, it was at the end of my sophomore year. My dad was like, somebody told him about this school in Vermont, and they had like 85 milking cows. And I would be isolated, and I couldn't get off the hill, and I would just, and that sounded great to him.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Off I went, and I was very pissed off. I remember hitting a wall, like, in my first 2 weeks. I hit a wall, shattered my hand. So not only was I stuck in Vermont at a school that I ended up loving, by the way. It ended up being an amazing experience, but it took a minute. But anyways, cast on my hand, first several months of being at this school. I wasn't a morning person. I was assigned morning barn, which you wake up with your little team at 5 a.m. in order to walk like a mile to the barn to shovel cow shit, before first period class. And I often didn't wake up, surprise, surprise, and I would get freezing cold Vermont stream water, like barely, like frozen at the top, but not so much that they couldn't break the surface and get, a bucket full of water. poured on me, on my bed, wake up swinging. And so
Morning.
What?
Yeah. Morning.
Good morning. So anyway, I ended up last 2 years of high school at that school where honestly I didn't get to do. I wasn't playing in bands. There was one other kid there my last year. I was a senior, and this kid shows up, this freshman, and he was walking around like, Vermont in the woods, but he had this Les Paul strung really low. He would be walking around outside, and he had these headphones that plugged into the guitar that I guess gave you like an amp sound.
Sure.
So he was walking around with his Les Paul, and then I just thought, like, who is this fucking guy? And we got to know each other, and we ended up playing a lot of guitar together. And he ended up, his name was Reb. His real name was Rebel. And I thought, oh my God, is that even a real name?
Yeah.
His name was Rebel Beach. And people might know Reb Beach went on to play for, big bands. I think eventually, I'm going to forget it now. All right, you can go look it up. Reb Beach.
I'm looking for you.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Later he filled in, he played for Whitesnake, but before that, it's Winger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the band that Beavis and Butthead effectively ended in one comment on one episode, I think.
Oh, no.
But, and he's...
Winger and Whitesnake is what I see here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing rock guitar player, and kind of like a pioneer in a way. I mean, really sort of brought a lot to the table in the 80s with the way he played. But anyway, that was him. So we were the only two musicians out of 200 on this little hill in Vermont, and thank God for him. So Reb, if you're out there, thanks for being there.
And then you went on to college, right? So are you playing music in college at all?
Yeah. So funnily enough, that phone call came from my buddy Squire, and I had several bands at college, but I finally that I played in, and I put one together, and I was playing drums in that. I was playing guitar in that band. So I played drums in some bands in college, and then put one together with my buddy Squire Mahoney, and called The Unnatural Act, and played all of my favorite stuff. It was sort of like a jukebox of all my influences, and from, it was everything from Chuck Berry to Brick House, and everything in between. And we had a fairly kick-ass band for when you consider that it was sort of like East Coast, kind of like Ivy League school, and not normally a hotbed for like R&B musicians and stuff like but managed to like find these guys, and we had a really good band, and we had a lot of fun. So I played all the way through college. Although I left with a semester to go because my recreational activities sort of got in the way of my schoolwork. And I took, the theme continues, right?
Okay.
And I took that spring off. I went to New York. I ended up playing drums for one of the Village People. The construction worker, David Hodo. Put a band together for him. My brother played in it. The bass player, a bass player from college who had graduated the year before, George Weiss, another great musician. Sax player Steve Ellis, who ended up to go on to play for Bowie for years and years. Anyway, and played for David Hodo. I lasted about 3 months, and my addictions got really severe and I was unable to really function. And long story short, by July 20th, that summer of 83, I was on a plane headed to Minnesota, of all places.
That must have made you happy.
Yeah, to go to gym. Well, the only thing I knew about Minnesota was at this point in time in the 80s and at school, starting at, I think it was either 1 or 1:30 in the morning, Mary Tyler Moore came on. And they had back-to-back Mary. It was like one and then the other. So it was like from 1 to 2 or whatever. It was Mary Tyler Moore. And in the beginning, she throws her hat up in the air. Mm-hmm. And they have this sign that says Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yep.
That's the only thing. It's the only time that ever entered my consciousness. And quite honestly, I was so out of it at that point in my life that I didn't know if Minneapolis was the state or Minnesota was none of it was really clear to me. It was like, that's the only time I heard Minneapolis, St. Paul. I saw it, and because I was up, because I was,
having
I had
fun.
Important things to do at 1:30 in the morning.
Oh yeah.
And I was on a plane headed there to treatment. And that sort of leads us into, in a way, like how you and I ever came to meet, how I ever came to be in the Midwest in St. Paul, at that point in my life, which was a really left turn.
We did a concert 3 years ago in Australia, and you told a little bit about this story. Going to Minnesota, you didn't want to be there. You didn't know who was like the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
Minnesota was, in your opinion, at that point in time, which I'm sure it was. It's like, here you are, you have to go, you're sobering up, you're changing your life so you can actually function again.
Well, I was planning on being back in New York. I had important things to do. We had gotten on Star Search. We'd been accepted to Star Search, the David Hodo band. We had done our recordings for it, and we had done our audition. And I had things to do. I was a busy guy in my mind, and I had important things to do. And I was going to knock out this treatment thing, and and get back to real life, and where music was really happening, which in my mind was in New York City, at the time.
And you happened to come to Minneapolis at an incredible time, actually. And this was right before Prince.
This was July. So the morning I woke up in Minneapolis was July 21st, 1983, which was the first morning I ever woke up sober, right? And that's my sober day. That's the last time. The plane ride over, I had some really bad Paul Masson wine. It was like a little screw up top, and it was like that. It was just a bad way to go out. You know what I mean? It's not the way you want to go out. But anyway, so Minnesota in very real ways. It would mark, I woke up July 21st, 1983, and that was the beginning of a whole new chapter in my life. I didn't realize what lay ahead for me,
and I met you around 80. Yeah. Well, you would, before I talk about when we met, you were there from 83. You were working in St. Paul, doing more of your rehab things, but you were playing. You were motivated to play at that point in time, right?
It took me about I went to rehab. It was like 30 something days, and then they told me they really recommended that I didn't go right back to New York right away. People, places, and things where I had gotten in a lot of trouble, and they said we really recommend you go to a halfway house. Right. And at that point, one of the parts of the program, the 12-step program, is turning your will and your life over to a higher power. And at that point in my life, not being a religious guy and not believing in Judeo-Christian God, and I don't, believe in, I have my own version of spirituality. The recommendations of sober counselors and people in a rehab, that was my higher power. And I sort of went, well, if this group of people who are sober and are trying to help me in my life are recommending that I don't go back and I go to a halfway house, I'm turning my will and my life over to their, to them. And so I went to a halfway house in St. Paul, right near the Schmitz Brewery. I mean, it was classic. It was like in this funky part of town near the Schmitz Brewery, and it was huge, neon sign the size of like a Broadway billboard. But of course, like some of the letters were burnt out.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know what you saw. It was like, but it was a low point in my life. So I thought, and I spent 6 months there. And, when you go to a halfway house, they want you to get a job. They want you to but they don't want you, if you were a lawyer or you were a doctor, they don't want you going back into your profession. They actually want you to go into work that's humbling, because one of the things apparently that we need as addicts and alcoholics is some humility.
Got it.
Not the most humble bunch. And so not that I had that kind of profession anyway. And so I ended up doing garden work. I mean, hoeing leaves, not, raking leaves and stuff. Busboying, waiting tables, eventually becoming like a short order chef, and stuff like that, for my whole time that I was there, 6 months. Once again, at the end of the 6 months, they recommended that I don't go back to New York, and I spend a year living somewhere with maybe some of the sober guys that I had been in the halfway house with.
Right.
Turned my will and my life over to them at that point and said, okay, I'll do that. And went to live, up on Summit Avenue in St. Paul, and with all those other guys, 5 other guys in this Victorian house. We each had a little room and shared the kitchen, and all working like odd jobs and just trying to stay sober and try to, get on track. And it really was like a year or a year and a half before I could even get up the courage to sit in anywhere. And that's how it started. There was that little club on Dale, Sweeney's
Champagne Bar. Yeah.
And I would pass it all the time going to the restaurant where I was waiting tables or busing at first. And I would pass it. And I remember seeing in the window, it was like Monday night jam night. And I just was way too nervous at that point in my life. I couldn't get high. I couldn't get dry. I couldn't take the edge off.
Right.
I hadn't played. I didn't come out to Minnesota with my instruments or a drum kit or a guitar. I had nothing. I had been doing nothing but program and trying to get my life together for well over a year. And I asked the guys in the house. There was one night I was like, I got to do it. It's the dead of winter, and there was jam night. I was like, on Monday. And Jose Jane, the first few times I dragged him out there, cold Minnesota winter, and we sat all night, and the guy would say, "Is anybody else, want to sit in?" It's like the end of last call, and I've been sitting there all night, and my friends have been sitting there with me, and I couldn't raise my hand. And I think like this second, maybe third time I dragged him out, they were like, "Motherfucker, if you don't raise your hand like this time, I'm never coming out here with, I'm not coming out again." It's like, we just sat through, all night, and it's like, and they called me up. I can't remember the guy's name, but it was like a little R&B band, okay. And I can't even remember it because having an out of body experience, I literally was just fucking nervous, and I don't know, my hands, my feet did something. They got me through to the end.
Yep.
And at the end of that, the guy asked me for my number and said, "Hey, I got this little gig." And, I think it was, what was the supper club?
Ruby's Cabaret.
No. There was a different supper club. Oh, I can't think of it now.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said, "I got this little gig, this like casual coming up in a week. Would you like to play it?" And I was like, he took my number, and, and that I played that gig, and I think I started to hear about some of the other bands in town, and I went, and I remember seeing the TC Jammers.
Sure.
And Bobby Vandell was playing drums, and he's another sort of like local Minneapolis legend, musical legend.
Sure is.
And God bless, you, Bobby Vandell, you know, like I remember he got off stage and that band was smoking, you know, and that was one of my experiences where I went out and I just thought like, fuck, there are some great players, some funky, soulful, great. Melanie Rosales was singing her ass off. And I mean, I can't remember the whole band, but maybe Behringer was playing guitar, John De La Selva, whatever.
Sheer could have been.
Your brother was playing?
Probably.
It was just a killer band. And I remember kind of getting up the nerve to come up to Bobby Vandell in, halfway, you know, when it came off stage for a break. And I did this like, man, you know, like, I love your drumming. And and I hear like this Steve Gadlick here and I hear this there. You know, I just started talking shop with him. And, but I was like a puppy, man, you know, and I was like, I'm from New York City. I just landed here. I'm a drummer. And I'm just felt like I'm blown away. Well, I don't know what I said, you know, once again. And he said, like, come back out, you know, sometime. Come out again, man. You should sit in, you know. And I think I'd only sat in once with that other, you know, that first experience and played that gig. I hadn't done a whole lot. And I remember the next time I went out to see him, he had me come sit in. And after that, he took my number. And I'm not sure when it happened, whether it was a Doug Maynard gig or something, but he asked me to fill in for him for a gig he couldn't do. And I filled in, I think it was Doug Maynard. And obviously it went well enough that I got calls periodically to sub for him. Man, he was so generous of spirit. And so I guess it was one of those times in my life that were I so needed somebody to help me out. And, you know, he was there for me.
Good man.
Really helped me get my start and my confidence in myself and a belief in myself. And, you know, and eventually Gordy did the same for me, asked me to fill in a few gigs. And these guys just sort of brought me up, you know, and I ended up playing around town. I ended up trying out for I played in a rock cover band called Heroes with my buddy Ken Zimmich, and that was all like more like Van Halen and Billy Idol and all rock, a whole different, you know, playing like bowling alleys and whole different kind of club scene. And then went from that to playing in a band called Bittersweet, which was all, you know, a whole other thing. It was much more R&B funk. Bass player was Rocky Garrity, who was really, if you're listening to those tracks from Purple Rain in the time, that's Rocky playing bass and singing the harmony above on the Bird.
Oh, yeah. And
playing his ass off and playing that stuff. And God rest his soul. You know, another guy who had, you know, had his demons, but man, he was funky. I mean, and a killer drummer. Ended up playing drums for Jesse Johnson, you know, a few years after that. And that's where, you know, that we were playing way more funk and R&B in that band. And that's kind of was my introduction into that part of the Minneapolis music scene, you know. And Troy Williams was in that band. I remember when Rocky left, Sonny T played bass. Came and played bass. And I remember whatever, you know, I can go off on a bunch of side tangents and stories. I remember the first time Sonny came and subbed, Rocky couldn't make it. And I had never heard of Sonny Thompson. And Troy was like, man, this guy's coming to, you know, he's showing up to play. And he's like, you know, this is the guy that like taught Prince a lot of what he knows as a guitar player and a bass player. And, you know, this guy's legend, you know, showed up, no gig bag, bass, like, you know, bass over his shoulder and a 6-pack, and plugged in hadn't rehearsed, and whatever, and just, killed it. Killed it. He was like, Sonny Thompson was something else, man.
And he's still ridiculous. We just
and still ridiculous
with him last week.
But I mean, how deep do you want me to go into the Minneapolis thing? Because this is all, this is a whole.
I think it's
trip.
important, but I think we can fast forward to you and I hooking up.
Yeah.
Because I was at that point in time, I was deep in the Prince camp.
Yeah.
And these guys know my stories. So I'm not going to get into it, but I was in the time and probably the family, and I was just leaving Prince. And I think I had written my entire record, and my brother Ricky produced it, and they weren't sold on having the first single for the record. And I don't know exactly how you and I came to meet. Maybe you do. Maybe you should fill me in.
This is what I remember. So what I remember is you guys, I had come out to see you play, in the club at Felty's for the first time.
Ouch. Yes.
I think you were sitting in with your brother's band Samoa.
Yep.
Or you were with Players. I think Players was a little later. I don't know.
Tiny bit later. Not much.
But man, I mean, I remember, it was like, this like good looking, coiffed white kid, playing like guitar on one song and bass on another song and singing. I was like, I hate this motherfucker. Because I had fancied myself like, I play drums, I play guitar, and and it was like, I just thought like, wow, and he's a good looking kid. And I just remember being really impressed with you. And, but we didn't really know each other at that point. I just, I came out and watched you play, and I knew who you were. And I knew that you right at that time were being groomed by Prince,
right,
to be the lead singer in this, in the family. I knew you had taken over one of the keyboard chairs for Jimmy Jam, in the time. And, but that was it. I knew your brother, and I knew who you were. A guy named Dan Brennan, who was a local kind of guy who was starting to manage people at the time, he knew of me, maybe through Doug Maynard. He knew of you, and I don't know how you knew, but he was the one that sort of went, these two guys should know each other, whatever. They're both, funky white kids, I guess. I don't know what his thinking was, right?
Sure.
At that time, I was playing, Jesse Johnson had seen me play with Alexander O'Neill at First Avenue, and Jesse had called me like the day after, a couple days after. I was playing guitar with Alexander.
Got it.
And he said, I'm putting this band together. He had already left the time at that point. He said, I'm putting this band together, and I want to know if you want to come audition as the guitar player. And that was Tamara in the Scene.
Margaret
that
Cox,
he had gotten signed to A&M, John McClane.
Right.
And so I think Dan knew me from that context, maybe, as playing guitar with Alexander O'Neill. That's how I knew Dan. He was on the road with us, managing Alexander. I had done Alexander's first tour as a guitar player. And so he just, for some reason, thought you and I should get in the studio. And and there was that little studio owned by the Brojos.
The Brojos, yes.
And I don't know what the context was. I think it was just to see if we could write a song or something, He was trying.
I was looking for my first single, and Dan said, I believe this is how it went down. Dan said, I got this co-writer you should really check out. He's new in town, and we got together, and if memory serves me, we knocked that thing out of the park. It was exactly what my record company was looking for.
Yeah.
And your lyric on that, with the exception of my third verse that we all love so much, it became my first single.
I'm taking the fifth.
Pleading the fifth on that. Yeah. So anyway, Oliver and I, that's where we hooked up and we became fast friends. Yes, that became my first single by the name of Rich Man. And then we continued our friendship and our writing friendship.
Right.
And I was on my way to LA to go make a video for this song called Rich Man. I had, back in those days, they were spending.
Well, we had, so right after that we did that, several weeks or months, my sense of like how long, but it wasn't, we had connected, and it wasn't long after that I had written a song and I wanted to do the demo. And I remembered like what a badass you were. And, I wanted your help with keyboards and stuff like that. And I said, hey, you want to play on this song that I just wrote? And we got back we went back to the Brojo studio and we did a similar day on that song. I had the song, but like we reprogrammed it and we redid it. And for whatever reason, and I'll let you continue the story, you left with a cassette of the demo.
I did.
In your suitcase when you headed out to do the video in LA of Rich Man, right?
Right. So here I am in LA. I'm learning all these dance steps. I'm working with this choreographer. We had become super good friends at that point in time. And she said, I actually have a record deal. And I was like, isn't that cute? That's so cute. Really? She said, well, I'm looking for songs. I went, well, a new friend of mine and he just wrote a song and maybe this would work for you. And I believe help me if I'm not saying this right, but I think I just gave her the cassette. She ended up loving it.
Right.
And then she got in touch with you, or her manager or the record label got in touch with you, and you all formed this great relationship together.
Right.
And maybe you should tell them who this person ended up being, or a little bit more about that.
Oh, well, okay. So yeah, you did. You played the song for her, or handed her the cassette, I'm not sure. And I ended up getting this call, old school phone with the curly cord and plugged into and a dial. But I did the phone. I had this call, and this like absolutely like caffeinated, English voice came blasting through the phone, and it was Gemma Corfield, who was running Virgin Records at the time, and that was who this choreographer. Choreographer was Paul Abdul, and and she was at that time choreographing all the the hottest acts, and she had just come off of doing the Jacksons, Janet, ZZ Top, all that funky choreography with the furry guitars, and she signed to Virgin, and so essentially I got a call saying from Gemma saying, like, we heard this song, we love it, who are you, what have you done, are you a producer, and I just lied my ass off. I had never produced anything other than
I am.
Yes, I am. Yes, I produced that cassette you have in your hand,
Right.
And she said, we want to fly out and meet you. If they didn't quite somehow trust, there were two things they didn't trust. Paula had a bad first experience in the studio,
right,
with LA and Babyface.
Yep.
We'll go into it, but it was a bad experience. It didn't help her confidence. It wasn't, and also I don't think they really fully trusted. Like they wanted, like, who is this guy? We'd never heard of him in Minnesota. So Gemma and Paula flew out, and we had a meeting. I remember Dan Brennan had arranged for me to be able to like sit with my feet up on the console at Creation Studios and look professional, because the fact is that I did a lot of the programming and stuff in my room, in my room at Summit
Avenue. Yes.
Yeah. But and that was the beginning of it, and they agreed to come back once I had cut a track. I ended up recutting a track for it, and I must tell you, I've always regretted that, recutting that track, and it's a lesson learned. We all know this, but I recut the track. I don't know why, but it's going to make it better now. It's going to make the real record now, that feeling. And man, I've always loved the feel of the demo that you and I did, way better.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I got to hear that.
Oh my God. Absolutely. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. And it was a hit record, and everything that came from it was great. But for me personally, the feel of that first swipe that we did at it that's the shit.
Did you ever fathom that record would do what it did?
I literally, so I ended up doing 3 songs, so that was called It's Just the Way That You Love Me. Mm-hmm. And then I wrote another one, Forever Your Girl. And then last minute, they needed one more song for the record. And I got another sort of frantic call from Gemma, asking if I had anything. And, I won't go into the whole story of Opposites, but it ended up being Opposites, a track. I remember it was the early days of MIDI, right? Yeah. And for some reason with the new MPC60, it had some bugs, and I had so much shit happening on the one, because in those days everything was like bam, bam, right? So I had like horn hits and kick drums and everything was coming, chords, stabs, everything was coming on the one. For some reason, the MPC60 at that time was just like it couldn't handle the amount of information on the one, so it slowed down. Like, at the one, it would kind of go like when it was locked to SMPTE.
Oh.
So when I went to cut the track and I cut whatever, and so it didn't, like, every time it hit the one, it was like it would slow down, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. I was committed to it. I was I had like a week to cut the track, fly out to LA to cut the vocals. All that to say that I handed in the mix for that with an apology, saying, I fucking missed the boat on this. I'm sorry. Like, I tried. It was one of those, like, I just felt like I had so missed the mark on that song. And I really had a written apology. And so to answer your question, did I think that this was going to like do what it did? Like, in no way, shape, or form. I didn't think I would ever get asked to write or produce a record again. I mean, I literally was like embarrassed, and I managed to cover up. If you really listen to that record, Opposites, which was the biggest hit that I had, it was like it was 4 weeks at number 1 on both what they had, R&B and pop charts at the time. But if you listen super clean, I did some things to mask like the slow down and, some 16th notes through the one, whatever. But it still has a little hiccup, but it didn't seem to affect the overall, obviously, impact of the record. But yeah. So no, I did not for a million years think that, I had been offered to give that song The Way That You Love Me while you were out in LA doing the video. I had sent that song because I was proud of it to my old man in New York. I did, and I sent him this cassette, and little did I know that he had played it for Russ Titleman.
Right. Great
producer, made some of my favorite records of all time, from Ricky Lee Jones to, Stevie Winwood. I mean, just amazing producer. And he had played him the song, I don't know when and where, hanging out at Elaine's one night, not sure. But I had gotten a call from Russ saying, man, I heard this track, and that was our demo, and I love it, and I want to cut it on Chaka Khan.
Oh.
And that had happened just before the Gemma phone call, and I bring that up because it was an interesting choice to pick Paula over Chaka.
And Chaka was hot. She just came off of I
Feel For You. Yeah. So here's the thing, and here was the logic. And I mean, once again, like, I kind of, it was a counterintuitive decision, but he was asking me if I wanted to co-produce it. He wanted to use the original track that as the starting point that you and I had done, and embellish it, change it, and then have Chaka sing on it. He wanted me to co-produce, and I ran it by Dan, who we've mentioned several times, I said, what do you think? You know, because the second call came in for Paula, who was completely unknown. And the only thing that anybody knew about her was that she was a super trendy, up and coming choreographer, right? And, you know, got to give Dan Brennan credit for this advice. And he basically said, well, if you give the record to Shaka and it's a hit, everyone's going to look at it, look at the liner notes, and they're going to see like Shaka, right? Yes, Shaka, and they're going to see Russ Titleman. And you're going to be sort of like a little, you know, asterisk co-produced by, and the impact of that will not be the same as if you have a hit with this, you know, unknown artist, female artist over here, first record, nobody's heard of, and you're producing it. And if you have a hit, it's a game changer. And people are going to see your name and they're going to, you know, and it will have a different impact. And I took that advice, which I lost a lot of sleep over, because you can imagine, I mean, Shaka Khan is one of my favorite all-time female singers. And I Feel For You, which was Prince's song, had just been a hit. And for so many reasons, I wanted to be on that train, you know? And I didn't make that choice. And, you know, as I say, the rest is history, you know? Had it been a hit for Shaka, not so much, not sure how much traction that would have given me personally, you know?
Ollie, how did that record, the success of that record, change your life? Opportunity-wise and financially?
Well, I mean, I was still gigging locally in Minneapolis when you and I met, and I was doing every gig that came down the pipe, you know, and I was rehearsing with Tamara in the Scene, you know, in the Warehouse for that thing, but I was playing drum gigs with whomever, you know, Bingham McCabe and TC Jammers and Doug Maynard, and like everything. I was still a working musician. I was not making much money. And, you know, I was living in a house with 5 other guys.
Right.
After I wrote that record, before it even came out, Virgin walked me over to their publishing company and offered me a deal. I mean, and I, once again, like, you know, my mentality was like, they were offering me an amount of money that was game changing. It allowed me to like not have to worry about money for a long time, and also to buy a 24-track tape machine and a console, get a house. You know, I moved in, you know, Westridge Drive near Paisley Park.
Yep.
That in and of itself was a game changer. But they gave me an amount of money that I thought, these poor fuckers, man, they really are dumb. Like, I felt like I had just gotten over, you know?
Wow.
Over time, they made millions on that deal. Of course. But it changed my life. My phone started ringing. A lot of other people wanted songs like the songs I wrote, and they wanted productions like the productions that I had done that you were a big part of, man. Your playing and your input and, you know, so much a part of what I was doing at that time, and so important to the sound of those records and as a sounding board. And also a lot of the time too, you know, as a fucking cheerleader for me, you know,
big time.
You know, I mean, I'm, you know, doubts all the time about the songs, about, you know, the productions, coming from where I came from and having a pretty big shadow hanging over me and pretty big shoes to fill that most young guys don't have coming into the music business. Like that kind of like, you know, it's daunting. So like a lot of questioning on myself. And back then and up until the present day, I've always been just, you know, such a champion of me and so supportive, and that sometimes that voice in the studio that I just need to hear that tells me like, dude, you're done. You're done. You know, I can't think of the amount of times you just like step away from the guitar, step away from the whatever, you're done, you know? And
we have a really good relationship that way, though. That's a trust thing that we have.
I can't remember the beginning of that sentence, but it had something to do with, I started to get a lot of calls for work. Yes. And you and I worked a lot because I think I called you on every single thing. I pretty much ever did, whether it was to write with me on it, whether it was to play on it, you know, and we had, you know, I mean, we did a lot of stuff back then, I remember. Yeah, and eventually, you know, recorded a bunch of stuff in my new studio, which was basically my living room in the house out in Eden Prairie. Till eventually, yeah, you know, I was doing the Sheena Easton record.
Yep, I remember that.
You know, one thing led to another with her, and that led to like a relationship at the time, you know, and which led to her kind of saying to me, if you're really serious about me, you know, you'll move to LA. And me being young and dumb and a little bit, you know, not thinking completely, you know, everything through, was like, I got on a plane, I bought a house here. Yeah, I think I did it all in the course of a day. It was the first house I looked at, literally.
I remember that.
I just bought the house we looked at. She came with me. I said, what do you think? And she said, well, if you don't buy this house, you know, if you're serious about me, you know, you'll buy this house. Long story short, that's what ended up leading to me moving out here in 90, you know, which certainly didn't stop our working together, but that sort of, you know, that got
right after my wedding. Right after my wedding. You were in my wedding, and then we shipped you out.
That was it. 90, right?
Sure
90,
was.
91? Yeah, 90.
October. Man. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and that started, you know, I guess this other chapter, which,
Aretha.
You want to wake everybody up? Do you have like a siren or a alarm clock sound or something?
BB Mac, Shaka, Beth Hart, the Cores. Here's a real question for you.
Yeah.
Did you have fun with the success you were having?
Well, man, that's such a loaded question because you know me, you bastard.
No, but I think and the reason I ask it is because I think that up and coming producers go through this, and I think it shows your humanity of what I know what the answer is going to be. But I think it's important to pass that on to some people.
Right. Well, okay. So there's a couple things that pop into my head. One is just about having fun and how that translates into the work you're doing. What I remember about, like, if we go way back to Minneapolis and back to those tracks, all of those tracks for Paula that started in my little room in that house with like a MIDI drum machine and a few keyboards. I remember, like, you couldn't get me out of that room. You couldn't get me to go to sleep. You couldn't get me, like, I was having so much fun and so in it and obsessed and so, you know, like, turned on by what was happening musically, which of course trickled down from Prince and for me, Jesse, and those grooves and those kind of records. I was so into it that, I was having so much fun. I mean, I'm glad there's no footage of me like dancing around my room, like after doing a bass line, but I was like so into it and so having fun. And I believe that translated into those tracks and those productions and those songs. Yeah. So yes, I was then, and I have certainly had fun since. But I will say that as my career progressed, and as I got more and more work, and now I'm like scheduling, I'm going to do this album, and then I'm going to do this, you know, and as it became work, you know, I didn't always enjoy it. I didn't always enjoy like having to, you know, there's a lot of dotting in the I's and crossing the T's if you're really, you know, doing a modern pop production, as you know, and as everyone knows. There's a lot that goes into it and a lot of hours. And no, it became work. Parts of the process are really work. And the more I did at a certain point. I was doing so many records and did it for so many years and I worked with a certain kind of intensity, which is just who I am.
Yeah.
I'm wired a certain way. So it's like, I kind of have like one gear when I'm working, or used to. Just like all motor, no brakes. And at a certain point, I wasn't having fun, and I reached burnout. And when I go back and I listen to those records where I was doing it either for the money, because I was getting offered lots of money to do these things, and I would say yes to things that I wasn't honestly didn't love, I wasn't in love with, but like I didn't want to turn down the money because I'd never seen money like that, and I never made money like that. So, but when I go back and I listen to that stuff, it's not like I didn't have a hit here or there with some of the stuff that did feel like a little more like work, making shoes, but that stuff doesn't have the real joy in it that some of these other records have, where I was having fun. So was I able to enjoy it? Some of it, but you also know, I'm so hard on myself that I think that I didn't allow myself some of the enjoyment of the success, because for me, there's always been that real tough comparison with the shoes in the shadow, the shoes to fill in the shadow. Yeah. So it never feel like, even after I had #1 records, that I had written on my own, man, I could always say to myself, well, it's not fucking Stand By Me. And it's not that, I always had that voice that was hypercritical. So I know me asking that question, but the honest answer is that, I never really let myself really let that in, soak it in. There's times in my life sometimes where I think about it, I go, man, I didn't do so badly, I mean, I did okay in my own right, and man, it's important to have fun in the creative process, and certainly important to acknowledge for yourself, when your successes, and enjoy the process, because none of it's guaranteed, man. Because all you may have is that few days in the studio with that process. I was going to say also, which is the most enjoyable part of the whole process for me, is that time, and all the writers and musicians can relate to that, if you're still listening, is that point in the writing process where you're like, it's a fucking hit. It's a hit. It's like, woo, this is, it's like writing a hit, high five, when that's the most fun. That is the best part of it, right? Because obviously 99.9% of the time, it's not a hit, right? Sorry, it's not a hit. Should have been, but for all the other reasons, it's not, but that feeling and that joy of the creative process and the spontaneity, and that just sort of like, man, catching this wave of creativity and enjoying it, that's the shit. That's really, at this point in my life, that's the stuff that I live for. That's the stuff I enjoy, man, when you and I write and work and or fucking grooving or write. So, really, that's the good stuff. That's the good stuff. And the result stuff, and I was so result oriented, I think, for so many years. It didn't mean anything to me, or I didn't allow it to mean anything, unless it was top 20, top 50, like the Billboard charts. Give me a sec.
Tony, have him come in, because you know what? We're transitioning. Bring him in.
Tony,
what are you transitioning?
We're transitioning to, I want to talk about, hey, brother, how are you, Tony?
What's going on, man? You just wake up?
What? Hey, you're commenting about the hair. Well, so Tony, here's what's going on. I'm interviewing Oliver, and we're just about to get into, step back a little bit from the camera. You're scaring the hell out of me. Okay, there you go. Anyway, we're about to talk about working out. And we just got done talking about his whole career, but because my podcast is called Music on the Run, we also want to talk a little bit about health. You're about to do a workout in 7 minutes, and I know the timing of this thing because I worked out with you 2 weeks ago. Tell me what you're about to put Oliver through.
I'm about to put him through some back and shoulders.
All
back
right.
and shoulders day.
Back and shoulder day. Yeah. What we're trying to do is build these up so we can support this, which is the back, and support the front deltoids based on his injury on his left shoulder.
Oliver, you've always
Yep.
had like 0% body fat. I hate you.
He's got
Your entire life.
he's about. I've been doing this so long, I can actually pinch it, and I can guarantee you he's about 16, 17%.
No.
Whatever. That's what happens if you just live on coffee and
Sugar.
And laxatives.
coffee and suppositories. I highly recommend it.
Oh, thank you. And that's a
Preferably in the
giant.
morning with a cup of coffee, followed by another cup of coffee.
Okay. You are live streaming, you know. So
Oh, we are?
you know.
Oh, yeah. This is the real deal.
The real
All right.
deal.
So you've
Are you
always
sure?
worked out. You've always
What?
worked out. Tony's been with you for a long time, right?
Oh, my
30 years. Well, almost 30 years.
How has working out changed from when he was 30 to now that he's 60?
Well, you know, when I first met him, he was
I feel like
Should
I'm
I-
not
should-
even in the room. I'm not even here. I'm leaving.
No, you stay.
when I first met you in our little spoof that we had with each other.
You tell them whatever you want. And then you
All right,
edit
all right.
it
So
out.
when Oliver first came to me, they requested me to train him.
Gold's Gym in Hollywood, 1990. I've just moved out there.
92.
Oh, 92.
92.
Okay, so there you go. My memory. Moved out there, wanted a trainer, you know, and I walked through the doors of Gold's Gym.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it was Kelly that requested him,
Right.
said, hey, go see Tony. And Oliver's reaction when he saw me was,
Well, they had said, God, you know, we're really busy and so many of the trainers are busy, whatever, but there's, you know, we got this guy, Tony. And I just thought, like, I'm getting the shake, you know? I'm just like, I'm getting
the bottom of the barrel.
getting the seeds. Right.
That's the theme for today.
You know, and I think I looked at him. What did I say to you? Because I was like, I wasn't super happy. I thought they were
wasn't
like,
impressed. Let's just say that.
yeah, I was like,
He looked at me like, because I had baggy clothes. And I do have to admit, I had the bandana on and I had baggy clothes. I looked like a gang member, right? So
yeah,
he's looking at me, probably going like, wow, what am I about to get into with this guy?
yeah. I don't know. I just think, you know, so yeah, I looked at him sideways the first time we met.
And it's funny because when I saw him, Kelly come up, hey, listen, I got this guy, he wants to retrain. He needs a lot of workout, you know, but give him a free session and see what happens. So as I'm looking at him, we're like, wow, who's this? I mean, he was skinny. He was a skinny little rail guy. And I looked at him and said, wow, here's this skinny white boy trying to be a rock and roller.
Skinny little wannabe.
Not knowing
Right.
who this guy. But then I'll tell you a true story what happened with him after probably a few months. He's really started developing. I mean, the thing with Oliver is it's in his genes. His muscle loves the weight. The more weight I give him, this guy people thought I had him on steroids. That's how fast.
I was big for a minute.
Even his chest, by shoulders. I mean, his muscle just gravitates the weight. So I had to be very careful and not giving him too much because, you know, I think you were drumming at the time too and guitar playing.
Yeah.
So you're like, hey, this is my life, you know, so be careful. But I downsized the weight. Then he's like, oh man, I can do more, which actually you're doing now.
Yeah.
To me, you're like, hey, dude, I can do more weight.
Yeah, no, look, I was really out of shape. We didn't go solid through for the 30 years.
No, we had a huge break.
We had a break. And then with the pandemic, I was like, I gotta, you know, I can't go to
I
a
just
gym.
happened to reach out to him.
Reached out to me, and it just felt like I miss him so much. We hadn't worked together in so long. And I was like, let's get a few weights. Let's just like go outside, man,
I think
and
we
work
started with a
out.
wooden
I mean, we had a wooden bench and like a dumbbell.
one dumbbell.
And man, it felt so good to hang with him. It felt so good also that somebody that I had trained with for so long and that
He knew my character, I knew his. He knew my flaws, and I knew yours. How to motivate him, basically. I mean, I know his character so well that I know when I'm giving him too much weight or he's not in a good mood, which is good for the trainer because he'll look at me, he'll like, okay, he's going through something, so I better I know how to play with it. I know how to adjust to him, and which is good for him.
That's an important relationship.
Yeah.
That's incredible that you guys are still hanging.
Yeah.
Before I let you go and do your session, Oliver, you meditate almost daily. What does that give to you? Why is that important?
Twice daily. Yeah.
Why is that so important to you?
Evening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the question? Sorry.
Why is that so important?
Why?
Energy.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of
Minutia.
there's, and there's a lot going on in my life. I'm a single dad. I have a lot of, I have a lot of plates in the air and a lot of stresses. And I have found that by meditating, half an hour in the morning, and a half an hour in the late afternoon, early evening, really just helps to ground me, center me, kind of allow me to reconnect with what's really important, where some of the noise and the stresses and the stuff that is easy to get caught up in daily kind of falls away, and I get more perspective on what, kind of what's really important. And I find that is just, sometimes it's imperceptible, like the difference that it's making. Sometimes it doesn't feel like I had a great meditation and my mind was busy and I feel like, what am I accomplishing here? Right. But it has always, helped me. And, and if I start to question it, or the times I've questioned it, I ask myself, do I feel better or do I feel worse after it?
Right.
Do I feel worse, and invariably over time, I've always felt better. And I think it's made a big difference and allowed me to cope with a lot of things and stresses in my life. It's an important part of my, that physical exercise.
Yep.
I need that in order to be healthy, mind, body, and soul, and all of that. It's all connected,
mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Yeah, definitely.
So,
well, it's time for you to go for your workout. You're 1 minute late. Before I let you go, I just got to say to you, man.
Yeah.
You know how much I love you. You're my brother. I cannot wait until we get to finish our song, number one.
Yeah, that's on you, motherfucker.
No, you got to put a guitar solo on it. I'll sing
I do?
it.
You're like,
You do.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I love you. Man,
What?
this is one of the best conversations I could ever have with one of my dearest buddies. Tony,
Man.
take good care of him. Kick his ass.
I will,
especially
man. I
today.
will. I'll hurt him extra for you today, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Ollie, I love you.
I love you, Paulie. Yeah.
Don't go anywhere. I got to end the show over on this camera.
Okay.
Episode 38 in the books with my dear buddy Oliver Leiber. Leiber?
The Leiber elf.
And that's just a perfect way to end this. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Music on the Run was hosted by yours truly, St. Paul Peterson. Edited and produced by my buddy Davide Raso. Artist relations by Owen Sartori. Video editing by Tanner Montague. And a very special thanks to the people who financially support this podcast. And remember, old friends are the best kind of friends.